One thing I really can't understand, aside from the fact that Keir Starmer has made no statement whatsoever following the Supreme Court judgment, which affects half of this population. All women are affected by the Supreme Court judgment, not a peep out of Keir Starmer about the judgment. Aside from the government saying it supports the judgment. More about that in a minute. But what I can't understand, aside from the lack of statement from Keir Starmer, is the failure to read the room as to how this might affect future voting, particularly with regard to what Labour ministers have been leaked to have said and reported to have said in WhatsApp messages to somehow try to plot to defy this ruling. As reported by The Telegraph and by GB News, I'll bring this to you here. First of all, please do subscribe to the channel. This brings you a fresh, brutally honest view from me, independently of anybody, including the mainstream media. I appreciate your subscribing to the channel. Let's take a look at this. So the Telegraph report that in these messages, Angela Eagle, the Border Security Minister, has said in so-called leaked WhatsApp messages that the official guidance that will follow this ruling could be, quote, catastrophic for transgender people. All that really means, obviously, is that single-sex spaces are now based on biology. That's all it really means. It didn't take away any trans rights. It didn't add any rights to women and men biologically. It just affirmed what was meant all along. So I don't see how that could be catastrophic, but that's what they say. And obviously you've seen news reports of the demonstrations and damage to statues and all sorts of stuff, which I'll come on to in a minute, all of which is utterly chaotic and sort of proves the point as to why people are so worried about these views. But again, more about that further down in the article. They say in the messages that the culture minister appeared to join in an attack on Baroness Faulkner, the chairman of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which will publish this guidance, which she has, and Angela has concerns about. All of this following earlier in the day, Lady Faulkner had said that following the Supreme Court ruling that a woman is defined by biological sex, clearly meaning that trans women could not use single-sex female facilities or competing women's sports, all of which is plain common sense and very straightforward, and that is exactly what the Supreme Court said, and there should be no ambiguity here. There should certainly be no plotting against it or trying to boycott it or anything else. This is a Supreme Court ruling. It is a landmark case. It's not open for debate. And so following this, despite there being no statement whatsoever from Keir Starmer, the government, aside from it saying that it supports the judgment, Downing Street, according to the Telegraph, said no action will be taken against these two ministers, claiming that they're not trying to undermine the Supreme Court judgment. But on the face of it, in my view, they plainly are. While the government said that it welcomes the judgment, Keir Starmer has not made any statement about it, nor has he commented on the vandalism of the suffragist statue by trans activists. Now, somebody had commented there's all sorts of damage to several statues across London during this demonstration. Now, somebody has commented that if that were damage and slogans written about different groups of society, that they would now be facing long prison terms, at least if they were prosecuted and either found guilty or pleaded guilty, they'd be facing long prison terms. But since they've done this and it's as part of this movement, nobody seems to have done or said a thing, which seems a little bit two-tiered to me, unless, of course, I'm behind on what's actually going on and they have followed these things up. But moving forward, there is also a development on, you might remember in the previous video, I mentioned this little comment here by Bridget Phillipson and said that it contradicted what she said in an article. In the post, she said that she's always supported single-sex spaces, but in the article here, she, just in June of last year, she was said to say that trans women with male dangly bits can use female toilets. Now, this hasn't gone unnoticed by conservatives, and Kemi Badenoch here has written. And so, again, I don't suggest that it's anything to do with my videos picking these things up, but lots of people have picked this up, and it's resulted in this letter here. And I am very pleased to say that this letter has been fired off. Dear Cabinet Secretary, I'm writing to raise a serious concern regarding false public statement issued by civil servants and calling on you to conduct an investigation. On the 17th of April, the Office for Equalities and Opportunity issued a social media post, the one that I've just showed you, quoting the Minister for Women and Equalities, Bridget Phillipson, saying, "We have always supported the protection of single-sex spaces based on biological sex." The sentence is demonstrably false, as I said in my previous video. For example, as recently as June last year, as I've just mentioned, Bridget Phillipson told the media that trans women with male dangly bits ought to be able to use single-sex spaces. YouTube for, choosing words and such. Trans women with male dangly bits can use female toilets, says Bridget Phillipson. Therefore, raises two possible scenarios, both of which are extremely concerning. A minister or special advisor knowingly instructed civil servants to publish a misleading statement in breach of the ministerial code and the principle of integrity in public life, or civil servants themselves failed in their duty under the Civil Service Code to provide impartial, accurate and honest information to the public. In other words, it's a lie. They've said one thing and they've actually done something different. Either scenario would represent a serious breach of the Ministerial and or Civil Service Code. Ministerial Code states that ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation. Goes on, the Civil Service Code requires officials to act with integrity, honesty and objectivity, and specifically not to deceive or knowingly mislead ministers, Parliament or others. That includes anybody that's likely to read these posts. Given the importance of honesty in public life and the great importance the Prime Minister put on honesty and integrity in his government, I'm writing to request that you initiate a formal investigation into how this statement was drafted, approved and published, and whether any breach of the ministerial or civil service codes has occurred. If ministers or advisors are found to have instructed civil servants to issue misleading material, there is a clear route to resolve through resignation. So if it was a civil servant that drafted and published this post, they ought to be resigning. If it was Bridget Phillipson who approved it to go out, she should be resigning because it's a misleading and false statement. Because, again, for clarity, the reason I say this, you're entitled to form your own opinion and disagree with me, but my opinion based on this is that this statement here, with her face on it, looks like it came from her because it's got her name underneath it, and it's quoted, it looks like it's quoting her to say, "We have always supported the protection of single-sex spaces based on biological sex." But they haven't, because she's quoted here in the Telegraph just in June last year to say trans women with male bits can use female toilets. So that is demonstrably false, as Kemi Badenoch's letter says here. So I'm glad this has been picked up. I hope that in some small part my video has helped to circulate and bring attention to this, and therefore it's resulted in this letter, putting pressure to come clean about the origins of this post, which is misleading the general public. Because again, as I say, this is really important because you might see this post and you might think, they've always supported this. They've always been on this side of the recent Supreme Court ruling. And that would be false. As you can see, it's been community noted here, and now it's been raised by Kemi Badenoch in this letter. So hopefully something comes of this. What really does get me circling back is the lack of statement from Keir Starmer, even just to say, we acknowledge the judgment, we will work with it. Obviously, we support the Supreme Court's ruling on this very serious matter. But what gets me even more than that, even if he doesn't agree with the ruling, I don't expect him to like every ruling. I suspect that he doesn't like the ruling because that's the most likely explanation as to why he's not commented on it. It's not as though he's too busy to comment on a landmark Supreme Court judgment. Surely he'd find 2 minutes to say, we acknowledge the judgment, we will work with the relevant departments moving forward. That would be it. If I were in his position and I didn't have much time and I didn't agree with the judgment, I would make 2 minutes to say, tell them that, there's my statement. But nothing, apparently nothing has come out from Keir Starmer about this judgment. But what really gets me the most is how he fails to see that this affects half of the population. Now, there will be a percentage of the population that think, yeah, it's fine, this really doesn't affect me at all. Whether you're male, female, you might think, well, it doesn't really matter which way the judgment went. But I strongly suspect that a good percentage of all women in this country will be pleased with this judgment that it now protects single-sex spaces. And the lack of ability to read the room in that regard and take this as an opportunity to say, we support women in this judgment is astounding. But that tells you, I think, everything you need to know. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.